Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing a book that I recently read, and it's called Finding Truth with Michael. It's by Darls Centola, and I might break this down into two different videos because I really want to review this book, but I want to also talk about how it relates to our community of the XJW community, or a community where we talk about JW things or Jehovah's Witness things coming from a Jehovah's Witness perspective. But I also want to see if I can get it to relate to why I firmly believe that there are religious organizations that call themselves Christians who are really cults. Okay, and I think it's really important that we have that discussion as well. So I'm going to be breaking this video down and this review into maybe 2 or 3 parts. Definitely 2, but perhaps 3. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe. And if you haven't already liked, please go ahead and like. Thank you. I first came across the book Finding Truth with Michael. I came across this author, Darls Centola, in a podcast she was being interviewed on, and it was a Michael Jackson fan club podcast. And I am a huge Michael Jackson fan. I am a super fan of Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, and the Jacksons, okay? And I was very interested. I didn't know that her book existed. It's new. And I did not know her story, and I was very interested in her story as it relates to Michael Jackson, being a Michael Jackson fan, but not just being a Michael Jackson fan, but being a Jehovah's Witness kid at the time that Michael Jackson was a Jehovah's Witness. And I felt that hearing her story with Michael, getting some insight on who Michael was as a young Jehovah's Witness kid, was very informative and was something that I needed to know. I needed to hear. When I first discovered that Michael Jackson was a Jehovah's Witness, that happened years ago as a Jackson 5 fan, through ways of interviews that they would give to the Black press, where they would say, no, we don't celebrate Christmas. We don't celebrate our birthday. We don't do any of those things because we're Jehovah's Witnesses, or we were raised as Jehovah's Witnesses. And so that, of course, piqued my interest. And it's kind of like an interesting thing to be a fan of someone, to be a kid and to be a fan of other kids who are Jehovah's Witnesses, because as a Jehovah's Witness, there's things that we cannot do. We don't celebrate birthdays. We don't celebrate any holidays. We are taught that the truth is the best way of life, the only way of life, and that everything else comes second, third, and fourth, or last to what we study in the Bible. Another thing is, dreams, we don't have dreams as Jehovah's Witnesses, not secular dreams. We don't dream about becoming superstars. We don't dream about becoming the queen or king of pop. We don't dream about becoming artists. We don't dream about becoming journalists. We don't dream about any of those things, becoming designers. We don't dream about those things. We dream about becoming missionaries, regular pioneers, ministerial servants, elders, getting married to ministerial servants and elders, and that's what we do. Okay, our dream is of the Great Tribulation, which leads to Armageddon, which is going to lead to a paradise. That's what our dreams are. So when you, as a kid, find out that someone that you really like and admire is a Jehovah's Witness, you live vicariously through them. But then you find yourself at a crossroads where you say, how is it that they are living their dreams and I am not allowed to make my dreams come true? And that's how I felt a little bit about the Jacksons, the Jackson family. I felt that they were living out my dream, but there was no way I would be able to make my dream come true, because my dreams meant that I would be considered a worldly person. My dreams would mean that I would be excommunicated from my community. My dreams meant that I was worldly and that I would not have Jehovah's favor, and I will not make it through the great tribulation. Of course, I will not survive Armageddon. I will not be resurrected, and I will not be able to see my family again in paradise. Okay? So to see 5, 6 kids on TV singing and dancing and doing the things that I wanted to do, I loved it. I admired it, but it made me wonder when I saw that Jehovah's Witnesses had the Jackson 5 had a whole album. It was a Christmas album. And every Christmas, you hear the Jackson 5 song. I saw mommy kissing Santa Claus. And I remember my young self saying, "Hold up. Why are they singing Christmas songs? Because we're Jehovah's Witnesses and we don't do that." So, it was little things like that as a young Jehovah's Witness kid that I asked myself, how and why. And then, of course, we knew that, or of course, the story went that Joseph wasn't, or that's the Jackson's father, that he wasn't a practicing Jehovah's Witness. But from what I'm understanding from reading Finding Truth with Michael, for a little while, it appears that Catherine Jackson wasn't an active Jehovah's Witness when they moved to California, and that she didn't really begin to become an active Jehovah's Witness until Michael and LaToya started attending the meetings in Sherman Oaks. I believe that's where Darls said that the congregation they were at, until in 1975 or 74, when Michael Jackson, LaToya, Randy, and Marlon began to attend a Cal Prep high school. That was when Catherine Jackson began to attend meetings again. So I don't know what the deal was with that. And Darls doesn't get into it. If I ever had the opportunity, and I would love to have the opportunity to interview her, I would like to ask her that question as well, because we were all under the impression that Catherine was still an active Jehovah's Witness during this time period, but obviously that is not true. She didn't start re-attending meetings, I guess, again until maybe 1974 or 75, which are pivotal dates in JW history, and may explain the reason why she came back. But in the meantime, I believe Rebe and her husband, Michael Jackson's oldest sister and brother-in-law, were active Jehovah's Witnesses, but they were living in Kentucky. So what did I think about the book? Well, as I said, I caught Darls on a Jackson's fan account, and I immediately ordered the book. I immediately ordered it because I enjoyed the interview. And as I said, as a Jackson's fan and a Michael Jackson fan, I was really interested in what she had to say, especially when I realized that she was a Jehovah's Witness, and that she was disfellowshipped, or what they call removed today. She was disfellowshipped from the congregation. She joined the congregation when she was 13. I should say she was baptized as a Jehovah's Witness when she was 13, and then she was disfellowshipped when she was 17. But at the time, she was a close friend and confidant of Michael and LaToya Jackson. And in the book, she shares her experiences of what it was like to be in the Michael Jackson, LaToya Jackson circle, and what it was also like to be a young Jehovah's Witness whose family really did not support her. I believe Darls said it was herself and her sister Susan Centola who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and how they got into the religion is that they were babysitting or babysitters for a Jehovah's Witness family. And as we all know, that when you find yourself involved with Jehovah's Witnesses, their main idea is to recruit you or convert you to the religion. And that's what happened to these two young people. They were recruited against really their parents' wishes. Okay, that's something else that's really key that Jehovah's Witnesses do. They will study with your children without your permission, your consent. They will baptize your child into the organization without your consent, without your permission. And we have to remember that Darls and Susan were minors, so they were indoctrinated into a religion that, as they began to grow into adulthood, they realized that the standards of Jehovah's Witnesses did not quite conform to who they were becoming as adults, which is a reason, a reason why I don't believe that kids should be baptized into a religion such as Jehovah's Witnesses. And the reason is because Susan and her sister Darls wrote is the author of this book. They were kids. They were kids. Their parents really did not agree with them learning the Jehovah's Witnesses doctrine. Their parents were against it, but they were sneaking and practicing the religion. And Jehovah's Witnesses have so many laws and rules and things that, they have to adhere to, that, it becomes an insular type of community. And when you have a minor involved in something that they really do not know and understand, and you have them, you indoctrinate them with this idea that it's us against the world, and the world happens to be your own family, that's very problematic, especially for a young person's psyche. When Darls was disfellowshipped from the congregation, thank God she had a family to fall back on. Usually when young Jehovah's Witnesses are disfellowshipped or removed from the congregation, they don't have anybody to fall back on. They don't have their parents. They don't have their siblings. They don't have the community that they were raised within. They're out there alone by themselves. And so that's the sad part about being young and being in this organization. Darls talks a lot about Michael as a young Jehovah's Witness, and he was obviously a very devout Jehovah's Witness. He believed everything that he was taught, and she was the one that was studying with Michael. And since she was a young, devout Jehovah's Witness herself, she was able to teach Michael Jackson a lot of different things and to get him grounded, as we say, in the truth. The Michael Jackson biopic, as we know, has surpassed 1 billion in sales. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing as coming from a Michael Jackson super fan. However, one of the things that I believe that the movie did not really touch on was the Jehovah's Witness aspect of it, because everything about Michael Jackson was Jehovah's Witness. And he was a really strict Jehovah's Witness, according to the book. In fact, it was Michael Jackson that told the elders on his friend Darls. He went to the elders to tell them that she had doubts. And so we've talked on this channel before about how having doubts and questions about the organization is not a good thing. It's considered a bad thing and the beginning of an apostate, or the label of an apostate, which means opposer. And that's how adherent, that's how strong in his JW convictions Michael Jackson was. I found the book to be very enlightening on Michael, and that chapter of his life that shaped him greatly. I remember as a young person, I remember when the album Thriller came out, and I remember how people in my congregation were very, very shocked to see the Thriller video. First of all, they were shocked about the song Billie Jean. That's number one. A lot of people were like, oh, shoot, Billie Jean is not my lover. The kid is not my son. What are we doing, Mike? What are we doing? You know, this is fornication you're talking about in this song. Committing fornication. And I remember that was a problem. And then the next problem was the Thriller video. That was a problem because people were saying, oh, this is the occult. Oh, this is, about zombies and stuff. And we don't believe in that. And this and that and the other. And I did not think of it in that way. I mean, you have Vincent Price on the record, and we all know that Vincent Price is the king of horror, or one of the kings of horror. And so Michael had to come out with a statement, and it was actually in the Watchtower Publications, his statement. And I just remember, the sisters in our congregation was telling us young people that we need to get rid of our Thriller album. It's true. So can you imagine the type of pressure that Michael Jackson was under? And, being an artist, and he had dreams. Michael Jackson wanted to be the biggest, pop star in the world. He wanted to be the biggest artist, musical artist in the world. And he had actually wrote that down. That was part of his vision board. And he manifested that. But what I also know about him now is that he may have been warring with himself about his art and being a Jehovah's Witness. Darls talks about Michael's sensitivity and about how he loved people, how he loved children, and how he wanted to start an orphanage, and so does she. And that was their kindred thing together, said they loved the same things. They loved being a Jehovah's Witness. They loved children. They loved trying to do things to save the world. Michael looked at Darls as a mentor. His first experience in field service was through Darls. He went out field service with her. He was able to get his mom to come back to the kingdom, to become active again as a Jehovah's Witness. And even when Darls was going through the situations that she was going through, when she began to discover certain things about Jehovah's Witnesses, and she, talked to LaToya about it, and she talked to Michael about it, Catherine still did not feel it necessary to keep Darls away from the family. Even when she was eventually disfellowshipped, Catherine allowed Darls to come around the family on the down low. LaToya still hung out with Darls on the down low. And I thought that was really interesting. Michael didn't. Because Michael wanted Darls to come back to the hall. And he was actively pushing Darls to rethink her position and to come back to the truth. However, Darls did not want to do that, and so Michael cut his association off with Darls. And that just lets you know that Michael Jackson, the way he was as a young person and as a Jehovah's Witness, he was very, very, he was deep into the truth. He was very, very committed to the truth. He was a strong young person in the truth. Even though you have that whole thing with being famous, making money, living out your art, having a dream fulfilled, that happens to not be part of what Jehovah's Witnesses believe you should be doing. Living a worldly life, yet you are a Jehovah's Witness. And I really think that a lot of young people young Jehovah's Witnesses like myself, where I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be, I wanted to be an artist. That was what was in my soul. That's who I am. And I remember being 15, 16, 17 years of age and knowing that I would never live a life like Michael Jackson. I would, even though I tried, being indoctrinated by this religion taught me that my future was not a worldly future. My future was in surviving the Great Tribulation and Armageddon and living into the new world and then beginning to dream or have dreams. I think that a lot of young Jehovah's Witness kids like myself, that we look at people like Michael Jackson as an anomaly. Had he had two parents who were active Jehovah's Witnesses, he would not have gone this far. The same thing with Serena and Venus Williams. Had both of their parents been active Jehovah's Witnesses, they wouldn't be who they are today. I know that we do a lot of vilifying of Joseph Jackson, and rightly so. But had Joseph been just a regular Jehovah's Witness, we wouldn't have the Jacksons. We wouldn't have the Jackson 5. We wouldn't have Michael Jackson. We wouldn't have Janet Jackson. We wouldn't have Jermaine Jackson. Now we wouldn't have Jafar Jackson. So the universe knows what it knows. And there are a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that are in the industry, that are in Hollywood right now, that were Jehovah's Witness kids when the Jacksons were doing their thing. And I'm sure that a lot of them feel the same way, that we looked up to the Jacksons because they had dreams. They were living our dreams. But we said to ourselves, how can we make that dream happen for ourselves? How can that be us? And it becomes a struggle as to, do I want to pursue worldly things or do I want to survive Armageddon? And that's what it becomes. And I just remember struggling with that. Do I want to survive Armageddon? Or do I want to sing and dance and be an artist? I would say that Darls's discovery of the truth about Jehovah's Witnesses and doing some information, that didn't happen for her until she was about 17 years old and she was in college. And you have access to a library when you're in college. And that's the reason why Jehovah's Witnesses really do not want their young people going to college. They'll tell you they don't want you to go to college because it'll interfere with your spirituality, or it'll keep you away from being keep you from pursuing a spiritual career or a theocratic career, which is auxiliary pioneering, regular pioneering, missionary service, Bethel service, for men, ministerial servants, becoming an elder, things of that nature. And that's what Jehovah's Witnesses want young people to do. They want the young people to, to pursue a Jehovah's Witness career, because they need the bodies and they need the young people to recruit other people, and they need to be able to pass this religion on to the next generation. So that means that Jehovah's Witness kids aren't allowed to have dreams that aren't manufactured by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. If that dream isn't manufactured, sanctioned, and stamped by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, then it's not worth, that's a dream that's worth not having. And what Darls talks about is how she began to really do research about Jehovah's Witnesses. How she began to see things in the organization and in the congregation that she was at that things didn't match up. They didn't align up for her. And she was asking questions as she should. And being 17 years old, she most definitely was at a point in her young life where asking questions is not a bad thing. And I remember she said that she had a discussion with Michael, and she had her questions, and these were the questions that she was going to ask the brothers. And when she asked Michael, Michael said, well, maybe it's not for you to know right now. You just have to have faith. You have to have faith in Jehovah, and you have to have faith in the brothers that think that your questions will be answered. And perhaps some questions don't deserve or need an answer too. We just have to walk by faith. And she said he would pull out the Bible and he would read scriptures to her. And she was like, I studied with him. He's good. He's good. He was a really, really good student because he's parroting back everything that I told him. Everything that I taught him, Michael is parroting it back to me. And I found that funny. That was amusing. I mean, she did do a good job of indoctrinating Michael Jackson. Okay? Because that's what it is. And one thing that I thought was interesting in the book, and I'm gonna let you go, was that the elders came to her and they told her she needed to talk to Michael about his afro. She said that the elders came to her and said that Michael needs to cut his fro and that she should go and talk to him about cutting his fro. Now, if you know anything about the Jacksons back in the 70s, child, come on now. How you gonna tell Michael Jackson and the Jacksons? How you gonna tell them to cut? How you gonna tell him to cut his afro? In the 70s, the 60s and the 70s, the afro stood for Black power, Black empowerment, and just Black pride in general. And so the Jacksons, the Silvers, everybody on Soul Train, everybody in my community back in Detroit, everybody, men and women, wore afros. And this was a signature thing for the Jacksons. The Jacksons and the Silvers had the best afros in the music industry, in my opinion, besides the Brothers Johnson. The Brothers Johnson has some cool afros too. But she said that she didn't tell Michael this. She went to LaToya and they talked to Catherine about it. And LaToya and Catherine was like, well, why would they come to you, Darls, and not come to us or come to Mother? That's what LaToya was saying. And Catherine agreed. Yeah, why didn't they come to me and ask me to talk to Michael about his hair? And Darl says she doesn't think that Catherine nor LaToya went to Michael to talk to him about his afro. But that was funny to me, and that is some things that elders would do. They were probably afraid to go to Michael on their own and say, hey man, can you cut that afro? They were probably afraid to do that because he's Michael Jackson. But they were going to use a young girl to do it. And I don't want to give too much away, but there are some other things in the book that are very important that has to do with a lot of things that's happening now in the organization as far as these lawsuits that have been, popping up everywhere of sexual abuse. And that's one of the things I would like to talk to Darls about. Has she ever thought about pursuing some things legally against the organization? Even though she's been gone for a very, very long time, I still believe that, the organization should be held accountable for, some of the things, some of their practices, even though they claim to have evolved from them. But still, I do also want to say that she touches on the area of 1975, and maybe I'll save that for another video because I see I've been on here a little long. So how about part 2 of this video? We talk about, on my next video, we talk about the 1975 of it all, and we talk about how Darls dealt with 1975, how Michael Jackson dealt with 1975. And I think it would be really cool to really just continue to have a conversation about finding truth with Michael, a memoir of friendship, faith, and first love by Darls Centola. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you have any questions or comments, please drop down in the comment section and let's get the conversation started. And also don't forget to subscribe and like. I hope you enjoyed this review. Part 2 will be coming up shortly. Bye-bye.